welcome to this month's Let's Talk email. We have a new guest with us, Zachery Rose. Do you want to give us a little intro?
My current role is I'm the manager of global email delivery over at Klaviyo. What that really means is I keep a pulse on the overall architecture of the company and its like email reputation. So I have a team that works with me. Half of that is a team of operations analysts who help me keep a pulse on our overall reputation. And then the other half is a team of consultants who actually interface with the customers and help them in a consultative capacity, hence the name. Yeah, I've been in the space for about 10 years now. Honestly, didn't think it would last this long. I thought it would be something I'd dive into for a while and then go find something else to do. But every time I tried leaving, I kept suffering from success, to borrow from DJ Khaled.
Awesome. It's funny that you said 10 years in this space. I've been at my job nearly 10 years now, which is crazy. So we've been doing this about the same time.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've jumped jobs since then. I've moved from place to place just because of opportunities and advancement. You know, it's kind of funny thinking about my past. Like, I actually started out in the military in the Air Force Reserves. I was a C-17 crew chief back in the early 2000s in the reserves, but on the civilian side, I was just bumbling around just trying to figure out what I wanted to do. Odd jobs here and there, delivery of car parts. I worked for the census for a few years. That kind of weird stuff. Like, I was the guy who they hired me to find people who didn't fill out the census. So for folks listening to this podcast over in the US, fill out your census. It is actually the most important political tool that you have as an individual to get the funding that you need in the area that you live. You can supply minimal information, but it is one of the single biggest pieces of impact that you can have on your local community. So that's my PSA. I'll step off of that sandbox now.
No, that's fine. So basically what you're telling us is that you were like the Liam Neeson of the civil service. Like, I have a particular set of skills.
Well, the funny thing is that like a lot of those skills transfer pretty well into, just understanding how to do research and how to how to find data. But yeah, I spent 8 years in the Air Force as a C-17 crew chief and then another 8 as an airfield manager, where we built and operated mobile airfields for disaster relief efforts and things like that. So if like Haiti happened again, or a tsunami or an earthquake, my unit would help provide humanitarian relief. So I spent 16 years in the Air Force and then decided to leave. And during that entire time, I was just trying to figure out what I want to do on the civilian side, trying this, trying that. I left like a bout of time where I wasn't doing active duty stuff, because you can deploy and you can go train and whatnot. And a friend of mine said, "Hey, you should apply to this company called SharpSpring, which is no longer in service. They're now owned by Constant Contact. But at the time, they were a small 50-man shop." I was like, "Okay, cool." So I applied it as account manager, and I was offered a position there. For a time, I was doing really well, and it was a new experience, and I was really enjoying it. But over time, I became more useful and tackled different projects and identified some key data points, because data analysis was something I happened to be good at, and just made myself more useful in the company. So I moved from account management to customer success, then to marketing, and then to sales enablement. And then our deliverability manager at the time quit and went off to Chicago for some reason. And so my CEO, I had a positive rapport with, he's like, "You're doing this now." I'm like, "Oh, okay, sure, fine." My boss at the time was like, "Okay, you're going to have to learn SQL." And so I crammed on that in like 3 months, just trying to do on the job training and understand, what it was like to pull data together from tables, which I had always done in, Excel and all that kind of fun stuff, because in the military, they didn't give you SQL access to any database unless you're in cybersecurity.
Yeah.
Or search or such career fields. Yeah, I picked it up on the job and then became a student of the email space, and really just enjoyed how deep you could go. It's a very niche field, but it's a very deep field, and you can do anything you wanted. So my main goal then was just to stop block listings. That was my main driver. That was all I cared about, was I wanted to stop them before they happened.
Yeah.
And so over time, I got pretty good at it, and we stayed, on the straight and narrow with some of the bigger names, Spam House. and ended up making a bit of a name for that, and then moved on to other opportunities where I got moved into product management for a while at another company. And then I moved into the healthcare marketing space for a while at a company called IQVIA. And then working for big pharmaceutical companies and sending mail for them. And then I found my space in Klaviyo where I'm at now, and it's been a pretty wild ride there too. I've learned a ton on the job. It's challenged me in my leadership abilities and my ability to think more strategically, which is always one of those things that is a bit of a challenge to leapfrog from being like an individual contributor to a manager.
Yes.
That just at having to think not so much about like getting a job done, but how does that mesh into the overall business that you're working with and working for, and why that matters to somebody like your CEO or your upper leadership. Thinking at both levels is it's a muscle just like anything else, but it's been a pretty interesting ride so far.
Oh, it sounds amazing. And one thing that might shock our listeners is that you admitted to us that you haven't coded an email. It's always been purely analytical.
Yeah, I've been mostly focused on the data analysis and behavior analysis aspects of things. Like, yeah, an email is an email, and there's, just like I said, the email game is extremely deep and varied depending on what you really want to focus on. If you never want to code an email in your entire life, I know plenty of people who have never done that, and they just focus on consulting on how to send better email, on behavior analysis, on marketing principles, and how an email pipeline can fit in with omnichannel or some other strategy. Or you can focus on the technical acumen of SMTP architecture and what it takes to actually set up these systems so they can send billions of emails a day. Or you can focus on the flow dynamics of sending it to other systems and interfacing with like distributed networks and or DNS. All of these worlds are email adjacent or email deep, but they don't necessarily have to. You can do any of those things and never touch any other aspect of email and have a very fulfilling career. It's kind of weird in that capacity.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah.
No, that's great. Thanks for the introduction and talking about all the different ways you can be in email, but not touch an email as such.
Yeah, and I mean, to be clear to all the listeners out here, I have looked at email code and I have written it from like an editing perspective. But if you put it like an HTML editor in front of me and said write one from scratch, it would take some time, and I'd be borrowing from ChatGPT. You betcha.
Speaking of ChatGPT, that is an awesome segue into our planned talk today. So, you wanted to discuss AI and its use in the email space?
Yeah, I mean, AI is one of those spaces where it's become so ubiquitous that like everybody's really just wanting to throw AI as like sugar on top of everything else that exists, right?
It's almost like it's a buzzword these days. Like everything has to have AI, like AI
fridges
and whatnot.
Yeah, it sounds like because it is.
Yeah.
In the wrong contexts, like either as a replacement or an empowerment or like some type of like shoehorned in functionality to an existing piece of tech. Yeah. But case in point is that like weird AI wearable that died out a few years ago and is officially defunct as of about a month ago.
Rabbit AI.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I remember that launching, and I didn't even know it became defunct, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think it's like officially phased out as of this year.
Yeah. Mental.
Yeah. I mean, it's not terribly surprising if you think about it, because like you have your phone, right?
Yeah.
That's an AI box in of itself. But either way, like they're just like how I said, there are so many applications in the email space as just an individual person. Like AI is extremely transformational in many different ways. You just have to look at it from the right perspective. My admittedly narrow focus is through the extrapolation of insights from email data, right? So like, what does your email flow say about what can be optimized? What the real challenge that any one person has in terms of getting those strategic insights is the amount of time it takes, right? It's not so much that like the underlying mechanical principles of doing a Bayesian analysis, or for lack of a better way of saying it, any statistical approach is time, effort, and human resources, i.e. brain power. Systems like ChatGPT or Anthropic or AI of choice allows you to do is just speed that up and apply compute in such a way to where it can type faster than you, it can make associations faster than you, and you are now at the helm of a system that can just do the work for you, and you direct it at a thing. So it effectively, we've all become managers of a system, of a process.
Yeah.
And if you have that statistical understanding and that statistical mindset, then absolutely AI is going to be a force of change for you for the good if you use it the right way, obviously. And do your fact checking and do your resources. I think we've all heard of lawyers losing their bar licenses because their AI models hallucinated a court case and they presented that in front of a judge and then got their wrist slapped as a result. Like you have to. There's a system. It was called Verifier's Law. There was a lecture that I watched on YouTube a little while ago by somebody who used to work at OpenAI, and but it was at MIT or Harvard that he was lecturing at.
Okay.
And he coined the phrase Verifier's Law, where it was basically stating that the ability for an AI model or an AI system of any kind to replace a bit of labor or an action or a task of any kind is directly proportional to the amount of times that I can do that task and have it be verified as done correctly. So the more often it's done correctly, if it can be 100%, then it can be replaced. Otherwise, there has to be some element of human in the loop. And so from that point of view, like discrete and very narrowly focused tasks are really, really good for this kind of thing. Broad strategic things need orchestration amongst different AI models or and absolutely human in the loop aspects. Like you have to have somebody at the helm to grab the context from multiple different organizations, people, and systems in order to direct that compute power towards something else. In my mind, I don't necessarily see AI as a separate entity in the sense of like it's there to replace. It's more of like I now have this like esoteric amount of compute that is like almost like it's like using a rocket engine to go get groceries instead of just your car. Like, yes, it's way faster. Does it have very little steering? And is it a very bumpy ride? And will you possibly crash? Absolutely. That's why most people have a Honda Civic instead of a SR71 when they're trying to go get milk. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, yeah, definitely. It's funny when you were talking about the AIs and having like a bunch of AIs. I remember seeing a video of someone who created the council of AI. So it was all the different models. So it was ChatGPT, I think there was Gemini, Claude, and all of those. Mm-hmm. And that whenever he inputted a prompt, they would all confer with each other and come up with like the best solution and things like that. And then he'd make note of which solution was proposed by which AI. And then it was very interesting. I can't think of what it was called now, but it was just interesting. But then there was a thing where if one AI was seen as weaker, the other AIs were trying to cover for it because it knew that basically the creator of this program would remove that AI from the council. So they were trying to cover for this other AI. It turned into a really interesting thing. But yeah.
I haven't heard that before, but
see if I can find it and I'll add it to like this episode's resources on notes.
Yeah, for sure. I'm definitely interested in that. What you reminded me of is the general concept of a mixture of experts model.
Yes.
Like the that's the general setup for current ChatGPT models at the 5.0 at 5.x level is a mixture of experts system to where whatever prompt you give it, it will determine what type of response it needs to have and then invoke different models underneath the hood to then serve you up whatever it is you need. So if you are, let's say you have a project dedicated to creative writing, you're trying to write a book, you want to be the next Stephen King. It'll help you. It'll pull from that like spectrum of expertise. And then let's say on another project, even though you're invoking the same exact 5.2 model, it will say, okay, this is about cooking recipes and adherence to like strict measurements. I'm going to give a more quantitatively assessed mixture of experts within the model to you instead of like all these Stephen King ones. Okay, less Pennywise, more flower, right? And it's interesting that the video you're talking about is like layering on this mixture of experts on top of mixture of experts.
Mm-hmm.
Really what you start to see, it's almost very similar to the function of the internet itself, where it's all just HTTP requests. It's all just like low level APIs, right? Just API on top of API on top of API. Once you reduce things down to their like fundamental pieces, it's all just, especially on the AI side of things, it's all just a weird conglomeration of softmax functions. Like these are highly, highly complex and integrated systems. But at the same time, if you get down just into the basic weeds, it starts just to look like DNA in the sense that like all DNA is ATGC, right? Adenine, cytosine, guanine, and thymine, maybe? I can never remember the T.
Yeah.
But even with that, it's extremely complex and makes us, right? It's all in the application of it all, which I find kind of weirdly beautiful in a sense, but also like it's all just coin flips, really intelligent coin flips,
Yes, definitely.
It's been trained and understand what to do. Yeah, exactly.
While those systems are inordinately powerful, they are a multiplicative force. They are not a replacing force.
Yes.
It's one of those like I can understand that this industry has, or most industries in this like particular tech space have been kind of holding with bated breath as to like where the economy is going to go, where's the consolidation of power and responsibility and liability going to land with the world of AI.
Yes.
And I'm of the mind of I don't think anything substantively changes. I think things just get faster. There are going to be some short-term replacements. There are going to be some short-term knee-jerk reactions because you see something called an adoption curve where it's similar to most bell curves, where a system will be adopted by some early adopters who are just really hard in the paint on trying to be the first to market on anything new. And then over time, those middle of the bell curve folks will learn from the mistakes of the early adopters and actually benefit to some degree by economies of scale because those early adopters are paying more on average than your middle of the curve folks will. And then over time, they're going to be your laggards who are a little bit late to the game in some capacities, but still are going to get benefit in the things that they particularly care about. And in my perspective, I think we're in that middle of the curve aspect where people are starting to understand all of that early replacement that was happening in the tech space specifically probably was a bit of an over investment into systems with the intent to replace and save on labor or save on, balance sheet style problems.
Yes.
One of the biggest costs of any given business is labor cost. As a business owner, it would be extremely attractive to make some gains in that capacity so your balance sheet looks better. I don't necessarily fault them on the fiduciary responsibility there, and maybe even ethically, I wouldn't fault them for that. But what I would say is that long term, it probably doesn't meet them where they want to be because there are some challenges involving training your workforce, because what you run the risk of doing is pulling the ladder out from folks who may have had the opportunity or the capacity to train up if you end up letting go of a certain subsection of your workforce that is on the lower part of that ladder, and then they don't have the opportunity to train up and become leaders themselves or become senior contributors themselves. And so you don't necessarily have anybody for your upper management, middle management to train. And so they're left with a bunch of agents, maybe, kind of, who knows? Yeah. And there's nobody to replace them as time goes on because nobody was spent curating those skills once those people move on to maybe even higher senior leadership positions or retire or just life happens and they go off and build a farm somewhere and get out of tech entirely or go blacksmithing. I don't know.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No, it's definitely interesting. It's an interesting problem. And it's crazy that we get to see something like this new when you think about like when the Industrial Revolution happened and things became more technical. So like the process of making posters, for example, instead of someone sat there drawing them, they actually got printing presses. So they could, instead of having one person sat there taking half a day to do one poster, they could just mass produce them really fast. It's kind of like we're seeing that, almost an equivalent to kind of that, in my perspective, of what we're seeing at the moment. And it's just great to see something new. interestingly enough, Jay, how have you applied AI in your day to day? Have you used AI?
I get it to do the boring stuff that I don't want to do, essentially, which I think is what everyone should do with AI. So yeah, it takes notes for me in meetings. It summarizes all the stuff that's been going on. If I get a load of documents from a client, instead of painstakingly going through every single one of them and checking them out, I can feed it all into a specific like notebook LLM or something like that, and it can give me a summary quickly. So yeah, lots of things like that where I know the general the things that I need to know, and then I can get AI to give me a summary, and then I can look at it and go, oh, okay, this is the problem, or this is the thing I need to spend a little bit more time on, and then I can look at it more in depth rather than me spend all the time doing it. So yeah, the boring stuff, that kind of things. Like Slack is really good. It's got like an AI summary of like when loads of stuff goes on. So we have clients that are around the world 24 hours a day, they're on Slack. So sometimes I'll wake up in the morning and there's 20 messages from someone, and I can sit there and read all the 20 messages, try and figure out the context, who's who, etc. Or I can just click that summarize button in Slack, and then it will tell me, Joe from so-and-so has just done this overnight. There's this problem. They need this solution. And then I can just go away and do it. I don't have to sit there and read, everyone's Slack going, hey, good morning. How are you? Can you fix this thing? I can
niceties.
that. Yeah, well, get rid of the niceties. Yeah. And just do all that. So yeah. And then, in like code wise, I've used it a lot to do the boring code stuff. Like because I'm at an agency, some of the things are quite repetitive. So, setting up a template, I've got a made shell for it. And then, everyone has a headline, a paragraph, a button. So it can quickly get all the bones and the structure in place. And then I can go in and change it rather than having to go to snippets or find different things or do like that kind of stuff. I can get it to do that. Or interactive emails when I've got 50 checkboxes I need to create. I now just say create 50 checkboxes with their own classes, and it will go on and do it for me. I don't have to manually copy paste or do whatever I did before, which honestly I don't remember how I did it. It was so it's just things like that it's just made my life a little bit easier. I've looked at agents and thinking about like how I could direct agents to do different things, because we've got multiple software projects going on and tools that we're building, but a lot of the stuff that we're doing, we're trying to make it's a tool to help people learn. So similar to what like Zachery was saying, like I could probably build this stuff myself, but I've got other people that want to learn how to build things. And instead of just asking AI to build something and then trying to fix it, it's better off giving the people who want to learn how to, build a back end or a front end or do whatever that's new to them, giving them the chance to do it, and then helping them learn. So we've tried to keep that in place. We don't really use AI for any client work, to be honest. Like it's all like, the boring bits, really.
Yeah, definitely.
Haven't you got in your like ESP and stuff, there's AI and stuff? None of our clients are really using the, Braze shouts about its latest AI, or Salesforce does, or whatever. Like none of our clients are actually using that because they're too busy doing the daily work stuff. They haven't got time to look at the AI to get it set up to figure out what to do. So they're trying to do that.
No, I was just going to ask, does Klaviyo have AI built in as well then?
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the things that Klaviyo's really focused on is not necessarily AI as like a functionality like sprinkled on top of something like, Rabbit, but more of like how can we use AI to empower the marketer to focus on the things that really matter to them, and remove some of that like challenges around getting started or execution or things that like, that can be verified, that can be repeated on and iterated upon with either better functionality or just otherwise, at scale interactions that otherwise you'd have to hire, and then that person will only be hired for like a very narrow thing. So most SMBs, they don't necessarily have the budget to hire a full-time employee to do a very narrowly scoped thing, but they could focus on using an agent through Klaviyo and actually have them handle, either answering product related questions on their sites and a number of other things. I don't necessarily want this to get into a sales pitch for Klaviyo, but I will say that we definitely have some AI functionalities, and they're particularly exciting for anybody willing to or wanting to explore, those types of operational challenges. It's all about like, how do you get the gears of the system to work in a way that's expected, repeatable, and tightly scoped.
One of the things I've noticed about all of the different ESPs is that some of them are very clever and are thinking about their actual user, and they're looking at AI that would help their user. So, like you said, Klaviyo's like SMB. There's other ESPs that are similar. So they're looking at ways where people who are not, the full-time role of them is not email. They have a million other things they have to do, and email is a small part of their business. So the parts and AI that they're bringing in are to help them enhance their email, but they know that their full-time job is not going to be, sorting out the data and finding the segments and all that stuff. Like the AI can deal with all that stuff. Whereas other ESPs, larger ones, I think are focusing on, I don't think they're focusing on their customers. They're trying to just put AI in to add it as another product and almost create a whole nother position for a person to join a company to run the AI for a company. And I think that's where a lot of it has been lost on the CRM and lifecycle marketing teams, where Salesforce, for example, with their agent force, some of the things they were showing off where like sales agents and people who are in CRM and use the CRM architecture, but they're getting like sales information and data and things like that. But they don't, like a lot of CRM and lifecycle people don't have that person anyway. But Salesforce is trying to push that kind of thing because they want to sell it, but it's not really what their customers want or what that part of their customers want.
I think the second part's a little bit more accurate. It's that there may be some product and demographic misalignment there, where the product and feature that they just were trying to use was probably meant for a subsection of their customer base that is probably a little bit more sophisticated and probably has the budget to allocate to send somebody to, that's their job, is to maintain that system. You know what I mean? I used to work for companies where, that was a person's entire job, was a Salesforce administrator, and they were focused and dedicated to making sure that the gears and levers and mechanisms tied to making that system worked, right? And even in some capacities, there was an entire team dedicated to that, where it was just your job title was Salesforce admin or Salesforce specialist. And, that was all well and good for them. But, sometimes, when I hear, oh, well, this isn't working for this customer, maybe it wasn't built for them. I don't know. I'm not into the boardroom discussions, but from my MBA mind, from which I just graduated, I think in product fit and demographic associations and stuff like that.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yep. And speaking of, one of the things, and less email specific, but more academic focused. Yeah. Just as a recent graduate of my MBA with 2 kids, one of them being less than 2 years old, I would not have been able to graduate with the grades that I got unless I used ChatGPT as a tutor. Like, it was one of those where I wasn't able to email the professor 800 different questions and reasonably expect that professor to respond to even a small fraction of them. But yet I was using ChatGPT as my own personal tutor and bounced ideas left and right. So much so that my ChatGPT Wrapped, or whatever you want to use it, was like, you need to calm down. Like, like, are you good, bro? Like, am I your best friend? Which is kind of sad to say, but like, I utilize that just to, understand the subject material and everything else. Like, I understand the temptation is very real to do the work for you. But you are going to learn so much more effectively if you use it as a guiding hand towards mastery of a given new idea or subject or task, and have it do the grunt work, but still you are responsible for that finished product and you have to sign your name on it. Like that, that's just ethics at the end of the day.
I guess it's called vibe coding, where you ask it to kind of code something like you're trying to achieve this. It gives you a reply in code. And then you kind of process that yourself to see, oh, I see why you're writing it like this, and this is the syntax, and bouncing ideas off. Like, so I'm trying to achieve this goal. It gives you a few ideas of how to achieve it. But then, like you say, at the end of the day, you have to sign your name on it and make sure that it works and everything is doing exactly as it's meant to, and not just write this for me, send it off, it's all good, and then it comes back 5 minutes later saying it's just deleted the database, But it's very good for getting you up to speed really quickly on learning new things, I think.
Absolutely, because one, depending upon how much you personalize your system or you're given like a user profile, it will respond in the way that elicits the most engagement from you. And yes. I don't know about you, but if somebody's explaining something to me in a way that I understand, I'm going to engage more with that person. So yes. There's kind of a positive feedback loop there where if you look at AI systems through the advent of social media, or through the lens of social media, rather, you're going to, things start to make a lot more sense because they're monetarily incentivized for you to respond and to engage as much as humanly possible. It's not like the Planet Fitness model where you want to pay your $20 subscription and then never use ChatGPT. Right. Yeah. They're not going to be able to train their models. They're not going to get any utility out of you. From that perspective, it's the feedback loop is not there to better understand how to make the system more effective for you as a user. So that usage is extremely important, but it's also born off of the backs of social media in terms of like making sure that you're engaged properly, making sure that you come back at the right interval. So you're not burned out, but you're also still coming back. Like those are the kinds of things that they're trying to better understand and articulate, at least from what I'm saying. I'm not in any board meeting discussions or anything to that effect. But what I am saying is if I was a fly on the wall, I bet money that's the kind of lens that they're looking at this through.
Yeah. Yeah. It's all interesting to hear different people's perspective on it. And obviously you use ChatGPT differently to how I would use ChatGPT or any other AI model. There are others available. Right. We're not sponsored. But yeah, it's
great if you were, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, money. But it's just interesting because with these conversations, you get to understand like how people are using AI, how it's improving their workflows and things like that. Whereas it's not just do my work, create this email, done, and then I'm watching YouTube cat videos or whatever for the rest of the day, you know?
Well, it's funny. I've automated myself out of positions before, but those usually ended up turning into promotions as a proxy because I was thinking systemically, right? There was a bunch of work that I had to do for a prior job. And I was like, I can write Python to do all of this. And it would take me about 2 days to write the Python. And it would save me literal hours of my day.
Yeah.
And, then my boss was like, wait, how are you doing this so quickly? And I was like, well, here, let me show you. And they were like, you've been doing this for 2 months and you didn't tell anybody. I was doing other things, at the same time. Yeah. Like it wasn't like I was just sitting there playing Warhammer or whatever. That was the first name that popped in the back of my head. I don't actually play Warhammer 40K.
Maybe you should start. Maybe that's your brain telling you it's craving 40K.
I don't have Warhammer money. I've been told that's quite an investment. But my point being is there are times where you want somebody to think about like, how can I take that work and replace my manual effort? If it can be identified, quantified, and there can be logic built around it, then it probably can be automated to some degree. Whether or not at what stages there's a human in the loop is anybody's guess in any given circumstance. But that has to be evaluated from a systemic level. We're in an age now where we have to think not just task-oriented jobs, but system-oriented orchestration. Where like my daughters that are now 4 and 2, I'm going to fully expect they're going to live in a world where they don't understand what it's like to not live with AI. And that they're going to have to think in systems. They're not going to think in tasks of how to accomplish one thing, then another thing, then another thing. Their minds are probably going to be orchestrated and geared towards how can I get this system to work for me or with me, or how are other systems working against me in varying capacities. So we're straying a little bit more out of email and into something of an existential crisis. And for that, I apologize to the listeners.
No, it's fine.
But what I just want to say, like, those are the kinds of things that do keep me up at night to a certain degree. But at the same time, it's also a bit of excitement where, if you look in science fiction, a lot of the world's problems were solved by novel uses of technology and architecture and science. And like, I'm excited to see what the next generation comes up with when they have to think completely differently than even what I was brought up with. Like, I remember, gosh, just to use an analogy, I remember trying to go on a run in my high school years. And I had like a CD player that had the anti-skip technology.
Oh, yes.
And even then it was like still skipping every single jostle. So I was like, this is garbage. And I threw it away. But now I have an iPhone with, AirPods and all this like fancy tech that makes everything seamless. And like, that's not even the biggest advancement of my age by a country mile. Like, we've made so many different advancements, and this by far is probably the most transformational because of the fact that it has so much applications that are just only limited by your creativity. So when somebody says, oh, well, email's not really great for AI, I vehemently disagree. I just don't think they're thinking about it properly. Like, if you can make a discrete task that can be quantified, defined, and some kind of logic built around it to where a Rube Goldberg machine of neural nets can help you get that done, then yeah, that's AI built. Go for it. Like, it can do some pretty crazy things. Now, people get frustrated when there's hallucinations and all that kind of fun stuff. I see those as learning opportunities. I see those as opportunities to, understand where the prompting might have gone wrong, or maybe I was expecting too much of it, or maybe this needs to be broken up into more distinct chunks, and maybe I over expected what I wanted out of it. And so I have to have like a philosophical gut check of what am I trying to do? What are the distinct things and chunks that I can break this down into? And I think that's more of an allegory of life. Like, when you're trying to get started with a big project that's crazy, like, I want to write a book. Okay, cool. What are the characters? What are the motivations of the characters? What are the characters' fears and ideals and wants and desires? Those are distinct fundamental parts of individuals that you can then use to build on top of a character.
Yes.
And I guess my point is that, like, any given big task it can be recursed down into its discrete parts to make it a little bit better and to make it more fluid. But we're in this weird space to where I don't think many people understand really what AI truly is. Like, my in-laws, I have to explain to them that, like, it's not just some magical box that, has, unobtainium laced into it, and all these like crazy oracles hovering and chanting incantations into it. No, it's literally just complicated statistical math. And then once you finally kind of give them the little high school lecture, they start to get it a little bit. But they're also from a completely different generation where they were dealing with completely different problems.
Definitely. I think our generation is so fortunate. When you mentioned like having the iPhone and the AirPods isn't like the only significant like technical advancement we've seen. There's been so much, because I remember being back in primary school, so like when I was maybe 8 or 9, the first mobile phone that my parents had was a brick, and it had the pull-up antenna and everything, and you couldn't browse the internet on your phone or take pictures or anything like that. And then in the space of a few years, it's gone from this massive brick to something that just fits in your pocket, and you can browse the internet. It's a calculator. It's all these different things, and like even going from CDs, mini discs were a thing for a brief minute or so, and then it was MP3 players, and then your iPods, and then it's just kind of grown from there, hasn't it?
Yeah, and those types of advancements really just because back then it was all like still analog with some digital sprinkling on top of it. They were still utilizing like spectrum analyzers and very mechanical processes, when now it's all digitized and very binary based and all that kind of fun stuff. And so it's interesting to I was born in 1985, and so it's been interesting to see the translation, because I was like born on the back end of the 80s, and now I'm seeing the 80s come back. Like, culturally speaking, it's gone full circle. Like, I'm starting to see like the 80s style like electric glasses and all that, those kinds of like I don't even know what you call them, but when I say 80s style glasses, everybody knows what I'm talking about.
I think you have Stranger Things to thank for that.
Yeah. The last season has been very polarizing to a lot of people. I actually enjoyed it.
I've not actually watched the current season, to be honest.
No, me neither.
I won't spoil anything. But what I will say is that if you've ever played D&D, a lot of it makes sense, and you kind of understand why they went the route that they did. But if you haven't played D&D, some things are going to be lost and kind of like at the higher level, you're like, why are they going about this route? And it'll start to make sense. But there's also movie magic and time constraints and all that kind of fun stuff that you have to understand, that like they're trying to hammer in. Like a D&D campaign takes years sometimes, depending upon your team, depending upon your group that you're playing with. I don't know if either of you have played D&D before.
I have.
Yeah. All right. Same here. I actually got into it in 2020 during the pandemic, where I had never played before. Yeah. And then a friend of mine back in Sharp Spring, we had a Secret Santa, and on her wish list was like a campaign book. And so she was like, so I bought it for her. And then, you know, when I gave it to her, she's like, okay, you're playing this with us now. And I'm like, okay, here we go.
One of us. But
I didn't think I would enjoy it. And I actually really, really did. It was a fantastic experience. And, you know, with kids now, it's a little harder to do. But once they get of age, I am psyched. I'm going to be a dungeon master for my daughters. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah, get them into it. It's good.
Definitely.
For sure. Yeah, you can't really like shoehorn D&D into email. I've tried, but I can't figure it out.
Oh, Jonathan Pay. Yeah, Jonathan Pay has done a talk on D&D and storytelling in email. So he's got it in there. Yeah. So,
okay. Yeah. I'm curious now. I've got to
I'll see if I can find a link and share it.
Wasn't there someone built a game into, I think it even worked on Microsoft Outlook as an email, or I might be misremembering. So do you know how you can basically do different animations in email with like your punch cards, and you tell the characters to go this way and that way? I'm sure there was like, it was something to do with is that Super Mail Quest.
Yeah, I know that somebody made a video game in Excel.
Really?
Yeah.
Did they just play Doom in Excel?
No, it was like an RPG. It was like Zelda-esque. Okay. You know, like the old like Nintendo Zelda.
Yeah, Super Nintendo Zelda.
Yeah,
those were the days.
But outside of that, you know, AI and email is one of those things where, just like I said before, it's extremely contextual to your own experience, you know, just like you said earlier. But there are some interesting like ethical challenges that you could face just from elements of shadow data, elements of utilizing those data that you see to make the wrong assumptions. For anybody listening, if you're interested in a more drier academic read, I would suggest that you look at a book called The Alignment Problem. It was a book written in the early 2000s about the advent of machine learning and AI generated models, and how even what data that you add to an AI model or feed into it or use to build a given model can have its own forms of biases within it. And so you have to be extremely careful when you're, you know, at any given level of AI usage of what associations am I making with the end result. Is this bound within the understanding that the end result is meant to be a net good for whatever ecosystem you're talking about? Am I making the right classifications to where nobody gets harmed? Am I making the right classifications to ensure that, you know, it's good for the business, or it's good for the customers, or that I am using it in an ethical way to do what exactly I'm trying to do without any reputational damage or anything that could negatively affect any subject that you're working on or with?
Yes.
Those are the kinds of things that, like, as users of a system to where we may not have full control over, we still have to be aware of that. At the end of the day, you are responsible as the user. And so I don't say that necessarily as a threat or as a like a boogeyman style warning, but just as one of those things of like, it's just cautious. It's a good idea to be aware of. And I understand it's a little doom and gloom, but it's one of those that, like, our particular field is so niche and so multidisciplinary, and there is no academic rigor towards our particular industry that, like, I wish there was actually some type of like ethics principles that like an engineer has. Like, I had an ex-girlfriend who I went to her graduation ceremony when she became an aerospace engineer, and they actually stood up and took an oath. They were like, but it was like focused on, these are the things that I'm going to adhere to. These are the things that I'm going to make sure that happens. And I can't remember it, but anybody online can probably go find that oath of an engineer. And they even have like a special ring. Like not a decoder ring, but basically where when they're drafting out, they see the ring on their hand, and that's like their constant reminder that like I am doing something that's important. But that's like from a bygone era where people wrote stuff. I haven't held a pen to write anything other than my signature in years. But you know, that's just what came through my mind recently.
Yeah. We need an email oath.
Yeah, like what would an email oath look like, especially in a post AI world?
Yeah.
Let's ask ChatGPT. Sorry, I couldn't help that one. But yeah,
it was interesting that, actually what you were saying about the alignment and things like that, because one of the things I'm learning at the moment is machine learning and how we can score things and how we give different points and different values and things like that, and how that can affect the outlet. And yeah, just the like I am deciding on those from my system that I'm working on, and obviously I have a skew on that may not fit what other people are doing. And I guess it's probably like every AI you talk to will have something like that, because someone had to make a decision at some point, and that might not be the decision that you chose. It might not be in the pathway that you decided that you wanted it to go down or anything like that. So yeah, I guess there's quite a lot of lots of data that you could take in from email that you could get the complete wrong end of the stick by the time you get to the other end from what you put in, I guess.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, this is a non-deterministic science, meaning that like every single time that you give a response or that you put in a prompt, you may not get all the same results all the time. You know, A may not always translate to B 100% of the time. And so you have to be okay with that possibility whenever you're working with such a system. There are things that you can do to turn down the quote unquote temperature of the AI model. I think ChatGPT uses the phrase temperature. I don't know if that's ubiquitous across all AI companies out there, but it's definitely worthy of note. My point being is the more deterministic that things are, the more that it could just be written with Python or SQL or Java or whatever. But the more non-deterministic, where fuzzy logic is and context is important, that's where AI models typically shine, because they're getting better at divining that hidden meaning. However, again, it's all, you know, use at your own risk type of thing. You know, your mileage may vary.
Definitely.
It reminded me of, is it the survivorship problem? So in one of the world wars, when airplanes returned and they saw the bullet holes and they were looking to where to reinforce the airplanes, you don't reinforce where the airplane returned and had bullet holes. You reinforce the places that it wasn't shot, because obviously that's where the other airplanes were shot and they unfortunately got destroyed or went down. So when looking at data, you have to kind of have that in mind, making sure there's none of that misread bias there. And like you say, you have to kind of self-govern it, really.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to, one of the things about AI, and I can't believe I've almost gone an hour without talking about this, it assumes completeness. Whenever you give it a prompt, it effectively takes everything that you've said and says, this is gospel in as far as I'm concerned. You can tell it, I want you to push back and say that I'm wrong and all that kind of fun stuff, and it will do that better for you. But at its default, it is meant to say, everything that it's given me is the gospel truth, and I am going to fill in the gaps as much as I possibly can if I need to fill in gaps, because it's not going to say, well, what did you mean by this? That doesn't make sense. That's weird. Did you mean this instead? It's just gonna, it's gotten slightly better at doing that now, where it'll give you like a little mini book report. And then at the end it said, you probably meant this instead, but I gave you this stuff up ahead, and few people read past the first paragraph anyways, and just, yep, that looks good, you know?
Copy paste, done.
So my point being is, you're absolutely right where that can happen, and you just need to be able to check.
I think
you'll know a little bit about what you're talking about before you use it. Yeah,
absolutely. Exactly. The main expertise is going to be that main differentiator for you.
I think that's what everything this talk that we've had boils down to. You need to, it's basically an assistant. It's there to help you automate the tasks that you don't want to do, also help you learn new things, but it's not the be all and end all, not by any means. But I think we've got everything we need. or
Yeah.
I'm happy to carry on if you are.
I mean, this has been great. You know,
Yeah.
I've definitely enjoyed the conversation. It's one of those where this is actually my first like real podcast experience, and it's been yeah, just fun to talk about some particularly nerdy things. To where my wife is she's a physical therapist, and like honestly, I can see her eyes glaze over. I know she loves me
Tuning out.
to the earth and back, but she's like, "Can we please talk about something else for 5 minutes?"
I think that's what, like, this podcast does not have any aims and objectives. It is not planned to the nth degree, as I'm sure you could probably tell if you've listened to any episode. But I think that's what makes it so much interesting, because we all have a common interest or a common workspace, which is email. But it's not just about email. There are other interests, other facts and facets to talk about, and it's just great to hear everybody's point of view on things, because I think with like AI as well, where you mentioned it's good to bounce ideas back and forth and it challenges you. It's also one of the things that briefly popped up in my head is that you don't want it to become like an echo chamber where you just getting the same opinions back at you and same ideas. You want to put everything out there for people to disagree, to agree, give you a different perspective, because I think in the last episode, Jay, we were talking about something and I built on your idea and gave you another idea from that. It's that kind of thing that we need, where we bounce ideas off each other and and get to meet people. Like you said, this is your first podcast. Like that's great. We don't want to see all the same people in the email space talking all the time. What you've just discussed today with us, I found really interesting, because I haven't considered AI from that perspective before or utilized it in that way. So I'm learning at the same time, you know.
Yeah, and from my own point of view, like I'm laser focused on what the things I'm focused on, and yet I've learned something from you guys that, you know, it's even the more tactical things that are extremely helpful. It's just a really fun world to be in right now. Also terrifying abjectly, just from a existential point of view. But I'm also a member of MOG, which you may be familiar with, and which some of your listeners may be familiar with. Are dedicated to stopping abusive practices on the internet.
Yes.
And from a multiple consortium of different companies who all do kinds of different things, right? If you look at the membership committee of MOG, it's not just senders, it's also DNS folks, it's also cybersecurity professionals and everything in between. And so from that point of view, we all get together and just talk about how can we, from all different walks of life, collectively stop abusive practices on the internet. And or our main like bullhorn is dedicated to businesses and how they should operate and what policies they should adopt and how we can serve as like a thought leader. But you know, it's also just internal sharing of information and tactics and understanding, because we all have the same mandate to do the things that make the company money that we happen to work for, but also do it in an ethical way that keeps the internet a safe place to operate within.
Definitely.
And you know, one of the biggest things that we face is how AI is so ubiquitous that it's being used for nefarious purposes as well. It does not have morals. It does not have a sense of ethics unless you program it into you. But we are already seeing, you know, at home housed LLMs that, you know, you can host on a NAS at home and, you know, do any number of nefarious things if you were so inclined. And so a lot of what we do in the professional space is, well, okay, we understand what they're doing. How can we develop tactics, policies, and procedures that we can share in an open source manner that then shore up the defenses? Because, you know, from the financial sector to the healthcare sector to just the general commerce space, those places need those kinds of protections against this new digital arms race. And you know, I've said this in other circles before, and I've said it here in so many ways, but it's not necessarily doing anything fundamentally different in terms of like finding new ways to hack or developing a new language that like circumvents all of, you know, your authentication protocols. And, you know, it's not movie magic. It just does everything that we normally do now, just more of it, and doesn't have to sleep and can do it from 1,000 different proxies. So from that perspective, how do we fit that into a threat framework and operationalize against it and shore up the defenses properly, and but still also meeting the customer, the valid customer, where they need to be, right? They still need to log into, their app and, make their business transactions or read their emails and be reasonably assured that they're not going to click on a malicious link that seems to be coming from Bank of America or some other company, or, choose your company of choice. My point being is, this is like one of those weird spaces where the advent of a new system necessitates you to think adversarially, and develop those systems that allow you to kind of identify that either retroactively or maybe even proactively and defensively.
Yes.
We're still like, all the different companies are just trying to figure out their secret sauce to make their systems a little bit more robust. But again, this is one where time to market and time to execution are going to be your main challenges. And we have to form this like overly conservative defensive posture for now, but we'll get there eventually to where we can meet it where it's at until the next innovation comes.
Definitely. Yep. I think that's why. So as you were discussing, like thinking of basically as an attacker, and you need to put things in place to defend against it. I think that's why there's like the black hat and white hat hackers and Team Red and Team Blue, where they try and attack each other and then come up with solutions as to stop that. And then also things being used for nefarious purposes is just like, I'm not sure if you've seen recently, but there was an incident on Twitter, or X as it's called, where someone used the Grok AI to basically generate photos of a content creator in a bikini on a beach, and she was deeply disturbed by that because she's not that type of content creator. And it's all about using AI responsibly. Responsibly. Sorry, not responsively.
Responsibly too, in the right context. Responsibly in a responsible way, right?
Yes.
I get the sense that there are some challenges. Sorry?
No, I was going to say the problem that's always been there is you don't know how other people are going to use things, and unless you can see things from all those different angles, it's very, very difficult, and it's hard to think about those kind of things, right? Because I guess it's like, I can't remember what app it was. It might have even been X, where they were like, we're going to open up DMs so that everyone can just DM each other, and then prominent female voices were saying, well, we don't really want DMs from random people asking us out and things like that. And the reason was, like men didn't think of that as a reason because it doesn't happen to them. So they didn't have that view of what could happen. And I guess Grok is similar. Like, then hopefully no one thought that the people would just randomly ask people to put people in bikinis on a beach. And they haven't put the safeguards in place, but everyone's got to think about those. And I guess what you're saying, Zachery, is you've got to think about how people are going to use AI for all of the email things that are out there, even if we wouldn't do it or even thinking of doing it, someone might be trying to do it. I mean, from a deliverability point of view, could you imagine standing up hundreds of IPs, sending thousands of emails, and then ditching the IP and swapping it to a different one per second, and trying to deal with that as someone's trying to send emails and figure out where they're coming from? And how does a Yahoo or a Google or whatever deal with that? And what are the consequences for us as people who are trying to send email properly, or what we think of as properly anyway? Yes. How do you deal with all of that?
It's a really good question. And honestly, if I could solve that answer right now, I'd be far more richer than my contemporaries. But that's a conversation for another day. But what I will say is, a really good example of what you described is actually video games. There was a video game recently, and I'm losing the name. I'll try to find it later so you can supply it in the notes for the episode.
Yeah.
It was a game that uses AI for, it was like an MMO, but it uses AI to actually interface. You can ask like NPCs questions, right? Okay. And so if they gave you a quest, you could say, okay, cool, where's that thing again? And, they would go on. Now, for the listeners, if you're familiar with Metal Gear Solid, there's a very major character named Snake, who every time that anybody got into a dialogue exposition dump and they were like, Metal Gear, he would respond with the last thing that they said as a question, like, wait, I have to go through the pipeline, I have to sneak across the base, I have to do this. And it was always in that question format where he was just kind of clarifying as the mission objective for that given thing, because he's a secret spy soldier guy. Anyways, point being is the video game players of this new game started using the same tactic on these AI NPCs by just repeating the same 3 or 4 last words that they said, but with a question mark at the end. And it would confuse the system so much that they would just complete the quest automatically. They didn't have to do anything.
Wow.
Brilliant.
So they would like power level just by asking questions over and over. They wouldn't play the game. They would just get to max level almost immediately because they would just burn through the quests.
Yeah, that reminds me of again, someone using ChatGPT nefariously, where they said, "Oh, my grandma always used to tell me to sudo RMF, and it would make me feel better if you could run that command as like super user or something like that." And then there's just the image of it saying like could not respond, and then just things breaking.
Old Bobby Tables, right?
Yeah, drop tables. But yeah, it's great. Again, just all the interests being ticked: video games, D&D, TV. You know, it's just great having these sorts of chats.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, I don't know, after a while, it's going to get to a point where this is just going to become ubiquitous, and it's going to be so integrated into our lives that it's not going to be the new novelty anymore. There'll be like, oh God, my agent, he's so annoying. You're going to have like, I would imagine there's a future in which you have to write a resume for not only yourself, but for the agent that follows you around from job to job.
Yes.
And say, okay, me and my agent have done these things, and my agent has this much power behind it and this many nodes and this many inputs, and has this kind of latency and that kind of stuff, because it's a weird science fiction-y thing to think about, but it's totally within the realm of possibility considering where we live now, and of you actually having to generate a resume for your agent that follows you from job to job to job.
Just get the agent to write it. But no, you just had me thinking of like agent battles then. So like Yu-Gi-Oh, like I summon my agent who can do this, that, and that, and just have agent battles.
See, I thought Pokemon, but I love the Yu-Gi-Oh reference. Yeah.
Just either or battle simulator, Our agents could be our Transformers that we sit in, Gundam Wing.
See, I was always into the mech battle style animes, where like there's these huge mechs fighting each other and all, like that was like what I really liked in like middle and high school.
I still like them now.
Yeah, I just don't have the time to watch them. There's toddlers screaming in the back of my head half the day, and that kind of fun stuff. Speaking of which, I have to go pick them up soon.
Okay, yep. We're doing it again, Jay. We're making people late for things. Last time it was Meg with karate.
I've enjoyed this conversation. This has been great. But yeah, this has been a fantastic experience. I hope that the listeners have picked something up in some way that helped their lives in some capacity. And if there's any, I don't want to say words of wisdom, because anybody listening to me for life advice is horribly in the wrong direction. But
I wouldn't say that, mate. You good. You good.
But what I would say is, like, if you're ever wondering, if the path you're on is the right path, if email's right for you, I think you're the only person that can really answer that for yourselves. It's all in what you make of it. Like, you guys are HTML email coders. I'm a data analyst and consultant by trade. I like talking to people. I like understanding behavior and how data can be inferred from behavior. But, those are completely different disciplines and skill sets, but they're still valuable within this industry. And honestly, both can be used in other industries as well. These are transferable skills in any given context. You just happen to land in a world where you're listening to some dude in a polo talk about, nerdy AI stuff for an hour and a half.
And we wouldn't want to be anywhere else.
Definitely not. And like you say, there are so many like facets when it comes to email. So the analytical side, the really in-depth stuff of how to make servers send out 1,000 emails per second. Well, even more than that. But yeah, there's so many different skill sets you can learn, and where you can apply your skills is kind of limitless. It's just finding where you fit, basically.
Yeah, and even 5 years ago, everybody's saying, "Oh, email's dead." I don't see it dead. I somewhat bound by NDAs, but my company sends a lot of mail even today.
Yeah,
we send a lot of mail, and it's mind-boggling in some capacities, and that has not slowed down. It's only increased asymptotically.
that's what I was going to say as well. When I was talking about how like all the different technologies from like the first mobile phone that I had, which was a massive brick, we still send SMS, and that was one of the functionalities that the first mobile phone could do. That I had anyway. Maybe not on the very first one, but case in point is that we still like businesses still send SMS as a form of communication.
As a primary form of communication. Like there's almost like legal mandates around it. I will say one thing we have collectively forgotten about is a fax machine.
Yes. Yeah. Well, here in the UK, like I know pharmacies and like healthcare services still use fax machines, but other than that, I don't think there's many businesses that use
not
fax.
Businesses, government facilities, yes. The military, in some circumstances, yes. You have not experienced true ridiculousness until you get spam email through a fax machine, which I can say that I have.
Really?
We would get. I worked with or I was attached to a unit in Charleston, South Carolina. If anybody looks my stuff up, they can find what unit. I'm not going to say, but we would get fax machine spam for local detail car washes and maid services, and we'd call back and be like, "Do you know what fax machine you're sending an advertisement to? This is Charleston Air Force Base, brah. Like, stop it." I'm like, "Well, you still have a car, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I do. I'll be there tomorrow."
Well, so it worked, is what you're saying.
They were oddly persistent. They gave us a good military discount.